Hello, and welcome back to Lead Wisely by WonderTour. We're really excited. This month we are starting a new series that we are calling Trust the Process. So, in our past episodes, we've spent a lot of time talking about leadership from the standpoint of mentoring as sort of a personal one on one activity. And at the end of the day, that's really the core of a lot of leadership practices. But we're going to spend a little bit of time and revisit some fun movies and talk about the structured part of teaching or coaching, about how they're not only do you need wisdom, not only do you need attention, but often students or learners will benefit from having a framework, having a structure, having a process around how they learn, especially if you want to scale it up to more than one person. So, if we think about the kinds of stories that we love to watch that have a process element to them, I think sports movies are the obvious analogy. And of the subgenres of sports movies, probably martial arts movies are the classic training montage that we all picture in our heads. And indubitably, the greatest modern martial arts movie is Kung Fu Panda. Okay, I'm kidding. This may not be the greatest modern martial arts movie, but it's a really fun way to start off the series. So we're going to spend some time with Jack Black in the form of Po, Kung Fu loving panda, and all of his friendly cast of characters. And as we always do, we're going to start off with a tough question about leadership. Can anyone really be great, Drew?
Great question, Brian. And this is one that Kung Fu Panda tries to address, this idea that truly anybody can be great. To take it back to Kung Fu Panda, at the beginning of this movie, we see Po, this panda who is kind of unsuspecting. Nobody is looking at him when they announce that there's going to be a dragon warrior and thinking, oh, this could be the next dragon warrior. This is the one that the prophecies have foretold about, who's going to overcome evil and establish peace in the land. He's a noodle boy, right? That's what his family tells him. He's a
Yes, he is a non-traditional candidate, as we would say in the HR world, right?
yeah, and we love him for it. That he doesn't have to be the strongest or the smartest in order to be great. Now, I think we need to tie this a little bit back to our idea of trust the process and why in this first episode of this series are we talking about Kung Fu Panda and are we talking about greatness? And to me, it seems intuitive because my view, our view, Brian, of greatness is that greatness is not something you achieve by getting a lifetime achievement award or by accomplishing all of the requirements that are in the check boxes of being great. It's instead a internal thing. It's something that you do every single day. Greatness is waking up every day and doing the difficult things, making the sacrifices, developing your character, but doing it in a loving and compassionate way, really by serving the people around us. And isn't that how we find Po? Po is not, again, he kind of pokes fun at himself for not being the most in shape to be a kung fu master, not being the smartest, but instead playing it off with humor and things like that. He really isn't the traditional definition of this great leader who's going to be this general, who's going to be the president, who's going to be the CEO or something. Instead, he's the leader that's required, though. He's the individual who has the character, who can teach others things that they don't yet know about themselves, as we're going to find out with Shifu. And his greatness, Pose, is in his process. It's in the fact that he wakes up every day and despite the fact that his dad keeps telling him, you're a noodle boy and nothing more, he has this vision for something more and he's not satiated with the current state of his being. He's not going to be okay with just going to the Dragon Warrior conference or whatever it is to sell to sell noodles. He wants to go to that conference to speak on the stage, to be the one who gets to share and serve other people with his knowledge and with his experience. And to me, that is the story of greatness. It's the everyday pose of the world that each one of us are, that we wake up, we go for a run, we journal, we meditate, we reflect, we prepare our family's food in the morning, we do the difficult things that make other people successful. That is what greatness is all about.
And that doesn't rule out being individually great at something oneself, right? And so we see a couple different flavors of this, right? We see there are different things you can be great at. There are different ways of being great at the same thing, and there are also I think the key lesson from the beginning here, right, is that different backgrounds can still lead to greatness. Right. So, like you say, he's the non-traditional candidate. He has some aspirations. He's got some things he's really excited about. And that's, of course, all of us have that, right? Everybody has, things that you could dream about. Everybody has the passions that you maybe haven't achieved, or visions of the bigger world that you want to go live in. But he also has the willingness to work for it. And I think we'll see that as we go through this movie, is that it's not just daydreaming, right? There is quite a bit of daydreaming involved here. This is a very relatable part of Poe, right? But he's also he's willing to push pretty hard, right, to get to where he wants to be. And that's an essential piece of it, is putting yourself in a position. Like, even the sort of the comedy scene where he gets locked out of the Dragon Warrior Festival, and so he's like bouncing around outside trying to get in, and he ends up doing this cockamamie thing with strapping fireworks to a chair. Gets crashes into the scene. Like, it is humorous and unskillful, but incredibly persistent, is the thing that this story is trying to show us, right? Is like, he's not taking no for an answer. Like, he's so excited about this that he's going to batter the door down one way or the other. And that succeeds on one level because it gets him over the wall, but it fails on another level is because it presents him even more in the light of, like, who the heck are you and what are you doing here? Like, you're such an outlier. So the challenge that he's going to run into is that both his potential colleagues, both the potential people he could be working with, and his potential leaders are all like, who the heck are you? So he's starting at a disadvantage. And I think that's one of our, kind of one of our recurring themes, but something to examine with this movie, is that starting from a disadvantage, you're going to get that negative reaction. You're going to go, well, that person can't succeed because they're so far away from being good, and so far away from our image of what somebody who could be good would look like. So maybe let's contrast this. So who's the character who should succeed? What does expected greatness look like in Kung Fu Panda?
Yeah, of course, everybody thinks that Tigress is going to be the one who gets to be the Dragon Warrior. In a way, it's Tai Lung, right? Because Tai Lung is kind of the first version of Tigress.
Right.
So we get this expectation, oh, the one who's the strongest, the one who's the most skilled, the one who's the most dedicated, that is the person who achieves greatness. But the challenge that we see specifically with Tai Lung is that he's not focused on others. And so by the definition that we're establishing of greatness is a process. Greatness is waking up every day and serving somebody else. Is that really greatness?
Yeah, he's focused on competence. He's focused on overcoming. He's focused on proving that he's the best. He's, in the framing of this movie, like his whole shtick is that they didn't give him the scroll and tell him that he was the ultimate warrior, and so he's going to prove everybody wrong, and he kind of went crazy and whatever. Right? So, like, he's just got the chip on the shoulder where he just keeps going and keeps going and keeps going, and it's all about him. So he's extremely good at martial arts, and the Tigress character is the one that is the most like him, right? But is kind of a slightly paler shadow copy. And so you're really not gonna, you're not gonna win that way. You're not gonna win by being, like, not quite as focused as the threat, as your competitors, as your enemy, doing the exact same thing that they're doing, but doing it slightly less well, or with slightly less commitment. You have to, as these movies love to tell us, right? The alternate path is often the wiser path. So before we get too much deeper into the story about Poe, let's go ahead and hit the intro. Hi, I'm Brian Nutwell.
And I'm Drew Perot.
And we are on a journey to lead wisely, to become better leaders by touring fantastic worlds and inspiring lore, by going on a WonderTour.
We connect leadership concepts to story context because it sticks to our brains better. You can find out more at WonderTourPodcast.com or on YouTube by searching Lead Wisely, all one word.
All right, so we've got Poe. We've got this character who is resentful of his current situation. He's in the noodle shop. He doesn't love to be in the noodle shop. He's aspiring to somehow just be associated with greatness. Like, he wants to be in this kung fu world. He wants to be, he wants to be a legendary warrior, or at least get to go hang out with the legendary warriors. He's kind of a fanboy when he starts out, right? And of course, in the setup of this movie, he's put on a path where he could potentially be great. But it doesn't go smoothly as you would expect. He's not accepted into the group by his colleagues, by the Furious Five. He's not really accepted by his presumed master, Shifu. He sort of blunders his way around a little bit, finds a way to at least be allowed to hang out by making noodles for them, sort of being part of the team. But he's not really making progress on the martial arts thing for a good chunk of the movie. And so let's talk about our mountaintop scene. What unlocks his potential path to greatness here? What's the scene where we kind of see them turning the corner to figuring out that he might be able to move forward?
All right, Brian, our mountaintop moment for this episode, and let's remind the audience who might be new here, our mountaintop moment is all about this emblematic scene that kind of ties the whole episode together. It's where we go to see from a high vantage point. We are able to see a little bit more broadly. And from there, we're able to take this specific application inside of this story that we're looking at and apply it to our lives through general modeling and frameworks, and even just kind of looking through the glass and seeing stories in our lives that are similar. So for our mountaintop this time, we're going to talk about the confrontation between Shifu and Po. Because up until the point in the movie where Oogway passes on to the next world or whatever he's doing there, and he gives this information to Shifu that, like, no, you need to reframe the way that you're viewing the Dragon Warrior. Up until this point, you're just trying to put him through all the ropes, all the tests that you would normally put a master through, and he's failing them all. And so you're disappointed in him, and you have no level of belief that this is actually the Dragon Warrior. He's asking him to reframe it. So this isn't the mountaintop. This is just kind of setting up the mountaintop. So everything to that point, Po and Shifu have just been not on the same page, right? Po's acting one way. He's still kind of acting like the outsider, like you mentioned. Shifu's acting aloof and like Po is not on his level.
He keeps failing, and they keep setting up things for him to try to do, and he's terrible. And so he keeps failing at it, and so he's getting demotivated, and his teacher's getting demotivated. And meanwhile, the threat is looming, and they're like, what are we going to do?
Yep. So they end up on the top of this mountain near the monastery where they're practicing, and it's great. You get this confrontation finally where they're actually transparent with each other, and Po tells Shifu, like, how are you going to turn me into the Dragon Warrior? And he lets it all out. He lets his emotions out. He's like, yes, up until this point, I've just been faking it. Yes, I don't, but I'm not growing. I'm not learning anything from you. And I have no belief, based on what you're currently telling me, that you're going to turn me into the Dragon Warrior. So maybe I should do what you've just been asking me to do this whole time, and I should just go home.
Right. And I love this because he's discouraged, right? This is the dark moment where he doesn't have belief in the future. But the reason he's so discouraged is because he does actually want to succeed, right? He does actually want to be great, right? And that is a thing that I think we can lose track of as leaders, is that everybody wants to be great at something. You don't necessarily know what it is. You get figuring out how to get that aligned with what you need as a leader, or what the group needs, what the company needs, what the world needs. Like, that's still the challenge. But we often look at people who are discouraged, or people who are non-standard candidates, or people who are unskillful, and assume that they're satisfied with that state. And I really love this kind of, this raw emotion of just like, how are you going to turn me into something amazing? But the subtext is, because I want to believe that. Like, I'm right there on the edge of, like, I'm about to quit, but I haven't quit yet, because I'm bought in to the idea. I just don't see the path. I don't see how I'm going to get there. You can't trust the process unless you can see how the process working, unless you can see it working for you. And so at this point in the movie, Po has not seen the process that they're putting him through is the process that took infants and turned them into ninjas. And he's not in either of those situations. And he just keeps literally bouncing off it, like it's not working. So he can't see it working. And so he started to get frustrated, but it's not because he's changed his high level goals. It's because he just doesn't know how to get there.
Yeah, I think the key takeaway there is Po does want to be great. And inside of each of us, we believe most everybody does want to be great. Even when they're not necessarily exuding that confidence when you're talking to them. Let's say your team members aren't necessarily coming forth to you and telling you, like, we can do great things, we can overcome the obstacles, I know that we're budget constrained, but we can make this work. Yet each of us wants to be able to do extraordinary things. We want to be able to overcome. We want to be able to feel satisfied at the end of the day. That's just inherent to what it is to be human. And so to figure out, okay, well, if the current process isn't allowing Poe to achieve that greatness, right? We said greatness is a process. It's an everyday waking up and doing of the things that you need to do in order to be successful. But like you said, Brian, there has to be some sort of a feedback on that.
Right.
You have to feel like you're making progress with the process that you're taking.
Yeah, so if you're in the situation where you're a leader that has, and you have somebody approach you with this kind of a conversation, right? It will often sound like complaining. It will sound like whining. It will sound like, discouragement. It will sound like, a lack of commitment potentially, right? But if somebody is like pointing out that they don't know how to succeed, that's an opportunity. That is, they're saying that they would like to succeed. They're saying that they would like to feel progress. They would say they would like to feel alignment, and they're not there yet. But the potential's there. The hook is there for you to potentially get them on the path to success, get them on the path to a flavor of greatness that is useful for both you and them. So, and I know, I think Drew, you've got a quote for us that I really love that we talked about in the pre-show in this direction, right?
Yeah, so I want to bring in this quote here from Martin Luther King Jr., of course. Quote machine. Everybody can be great because anybody can serve. You don't have to have a college degree to serve. You don't have to make your subject and verb agree to serve. You only need a heart full of grace, a soul generated by love.
Anybody can serve is a nice reframing of it, right? I love that conflating of service and greatness, right? And so, yeah, so what the fun part about this, from the viewpoint of the learner, from the viewpoint of the Poe in this story, right, is if you're in that position of intense frustration about not knowing how to reach your goals, like, yeah, that's time to have a hard conversation with your boss, with your teacher, with your mentor, with your coach. Like, I'm not getting there. I don't feel like I'm getting any, I don't feel like I'm getting there any closer. And be transparent, like, and I really want to, like, it's not that I'm not willing to work hard, right? What can we change so that I can see myself successful? What can we change so I can feel progress? That's the learner part of it. Now, and I think we're going to spend the next episode talking about the teacher part of it, the mentor, the coach. Like, what does that look like if you are in that role as a leader? But just for this episode, being sensitive to the fact that that's there, that the fact that you might have a panda that's going to be really good at kung fu, even if that wasn't your expectation. That's a thing. That's a framing for every interaction that you can have with the people under you that may be struggling.
Yeah, to see it starts out right by seeing yourself as being able to achieve greatness by doing the thing every single day, by, as MLK tells us, finding your opportunity to serve, finding what your unique skill set and circumstances allow you to do to serve. And so if you're the manager who's managing somebody who you're trying to help them to achieve greatness, it starts with looking at what you are doing to achieve your greatness, right? Because you're going to need to serve that person. If you're the dissatisfied associate in the situation who's working for somebody who's asking for help, like you said, Brian, that complaint that the current things we're doing aren't working, that I don't have the skill that I need or whatever, it's not a, oh man, I have this associate that just doesn't do a good job. And, they're always complaining. It's like, okay, they're looking for something better. So as that person, whichever situation we find ourselves in, the opportunity is to see, okay, what can I do to serve? For me, one of the things that I like to do to center myself when I feel like I am getting a little bit aimless is, all right, well, I need to stop working this morning and I need to go serve somebody this morning. I need to stop focusing on achieving this very specific goal that I'm frustrated with,
Mm-hmm.
or I need to stop focusing on improving myself or improving the people around me when I'm not getting the right feedback. And
Right.
I just need to go out and hands on, make a meal for somebody, serve a meal to somebody, have a session with somebody who is really in a tough spot in life, and just listen to them and, share stories with them, ask them questions, whatever it might be, because it's that act of service that often unlocks the flow for us. That is the daily greatness, and getting caught up in achieving the metric is the greatness.
Right.
That's a trap.
Right. No, I really like that. That's a great. There's a great redirect there, and the redirect doesn't have to be like I leave the office and go do a completely different thing. That can be like I'm not making progress on my thing, or I'm a little bit stuck. Can I just go help somebody else with something? Right? Can I make something go better in my environment? Can I be around somebody that's good at something and sort of just provide service where I can find it? Right. So the example in this movie is like Poe figures out that he can, hey, I can make noodles for these guys, like I can hang out with these great kung fu warriors, and at least I'm really good at this, and so I'm going to bring that as my service that sort of earns their trust and finds me a way to have a place here while I'm figuring out the rest of my stuff. And of course, in the in the inevitable logic of the movie, then that turns out to be the unlock, right? Is that once you've turned out to be great at one thing, you can actually leverage that into being great at other, right? You can, once you've learned what that repetition and skill and recognition of skill looks like inside yourself in one domain, you can transfer it to others. So it's super on the nose in this movie, right? His love of food is what unlocks his love of martial arts. But what puts him in that position is his persistence and his desire to be associated with something greater than what he's currently doing, and his willingness to be sort of humbled in that context once he gets there. Like
Mm.
I actually stink. I'm actually terrible at this, and what I'm good at is making noodles. You know, help me out. What do I got to do next? How do I get out of this box? Like that humility and honesty, coupled with the persistence and desire, are the things that are the unlock for him. And I suspect that that's going to be a lesson we see over and over again, but probably not a bad way to look at it.
Mm. That's great. And in the end, is it his a little bit maybe it's his unlock of the combination of being the noodle boy, the food guy, and the being the how that unlocks his martial arts capability. Like partly
Mm-hmm.
that is how he defeats Tai Lung,
Yeah.
but partly how he defeats Tai Lung is the same exact way that he approaches everything. It's by being the servant in the situation. At first he's like, all right, fine. Well, I'm useless. So at least, like, Shifu doesn't believe in me and he just wants me to leave. The dragon warrior isn't a real thing. So I'm just going to go and at least, like, help my dad and help the townsfolk get out of here. And then he has that moment where he recognizes what the dragon warrior actually is, that it's inside of him the whole time. And that to be the dragon warrior, he has to just be himself and he has to serve regardless of the external stimuli that he's getting, regardless of the feedback from Shifu or the Furious Five or any of these other things, or his dad for that matter. He has to just go serve. And that's what he does, right? He shows up with a very minimal plan to defeat Tai Lung. He's like, I learned previously that I can fight for the dumpling. So I will imagine the Dragon Warrior scroll as the dumpling, and that will be step one. But he doesn't know anything beyond that because he realizes that his greatness is to just put one foot in front of the other and show up for the things that he's supposed to show up for, and everything else tends to unlock itself.
Yeah. No, that's fun. You're absolutely right. And it's he doesn't uh he doesn't presume that he's amazing at something, but he is surrounded by examples of people that are working really hard to be amazing, right? He's got that going for him even from very early on, right? Like he doesn't want to be great at noodles, but he at least learned, his father or stepfather, the the duck that's raising him is right. Such a ridiculous movie, right? But like, but he's got this example, like somebody who's completely committed to being really good at something. Like, and it's not the thing that he's excited about, but again, you can sort of transfer that across domains. Like, I'm just going to be super sincere about the thing that I'm excited about and go run really hard at it. And if it's my turn to serve, then it's my turn to serve. Okay, I guess I'm gonna go step up.
I love it. This was a great starting point for Trust the Process, right? This wasn't super mechanical. This wasn't quite the Karate Kid, just follow the master and then deviate from the master. Instead, this is like really what can the master learn from the student? And I think that's what we're going to talk about in the next episode.
Yeah, I think looking forward to seeing Shifu's inverse journey in this movie, which is equally ridiculous, especially as voiced by Dustin Hoffman, but also has some fun things for us to deduce. So I'm looking forward to that conversation. All right. Well, thanks everyone for joining us. As always, we had a really good time. We'll be back next week with part 2 of Kung Fu Panda. And in the meantime, just remember, as we always say, character is destiny.